What do you want from me?
Does art need to justify its own existence?
A book can just exist. If The Hobbit was the only book Tolkien ever wrote, would anyone complain about it? It is a finished story after all. It didn't need The Lord of the Rings, but nowadays we appreciate and value those books as some of the greatest fantasy stories ever written, even if in principle they didn't need to exist. But did The Hobbit need to exist? Would anyone be dead without it? Well, now of course.
Art is a necessity to the author because it satisfies the desire to create, and to the audience because it enhances one's outlook on life. So the only thing art needs to justify its own existence is to satisfy those needs.
But what about quality, or integrity? A story can simply exist by itself and be self-contained and not require a sequel, so is making a sequel inherently wrong? What if the sequel greatly expands upon the ideas of the original story? Rejecting the idea of a sequel on principle is denying the possibility of Empire Strikes Back, Metal Gear Solid 2, and Aliens, all of which are considered to be just as good, if not far superior to their predecessors which could very well be simply standalone stories. So I ask you now, how does a sequel justify its own existence?
Whatever your criteria is, I can give you a pretty good example of a story that will not meet it. Drakengard.
Oh yes, I'm the great pretending that I'm my such. I pretend, but no one can tell. The great, a hard girl can see like a clown. I see heart like a cloud, and pretending that you still.
Drakengard 2 is a game that fundamentally should not exist. But you know the funny thing? Drakengard itself is also a game that shouldn't exist. There's gonna be a lot of comparing in this one, you have been warned. Drakengard's development history was a big, wet mess. First, it was just meant to be an aerial combat game on Dragonback, think Panzer Dragoon. But then the people at Square looked over at Koei Tecmo and said, hey, that game Dynasty Warriors is doing pretty well, we should do that. They said as they had never developed any game even similar to that style. So now this is a game where you have dragon segments and ground combat segments. Actually, let's mush them together into an unholy abomination that is at best technically impressive, maybe, but in practice it's a big, clunky, boring mess of a game with no clear objective. Hell, the team was fully expecting Drakengard to get rejected because of its mature themes and darker story, but thanks to some insane luck, the people at Sony were just so tired from reviewing game pitches all day that they simply approved it without even looking at it. Does it surprise to you now that the original game director bailed on them? Game director Takuya Iwasaki straight up left. Allegedly because he was busy with other things, but is it too much to speculate that he had little faith in the project? Enter Yoko Taro, initially just an art director, later tasked with developing the story, world, and characters. Now imagine yourself in that situation. You have a disjointed, clunky experience that is not very fun to play, and now you have to make sense of it, and give it a story that makes sense and justifies the game mechanics. What would you do?
Don't answer that, I can't hear you. But this is what Yoko Taro did. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't try to course correct. He didn't try to make it good.
The result is a very unique and memorable narrative that is not only engaging, but it offers a commentary about the game's own existence and your relationship to it. Of course, everyone would be miserable in a game where you kill people by the thousands without giving it a second thought. Of course, the very creator of this world would hate the humans who never did anything but kill each other. Of course, the main character would be a mute, incapable of reasoning or bargaining, only ever communicating through violence. And of course, the game would not have a single happy ending, because someone like Kaim, someone like you, who seeks to kill for the fun of it, would not deserve to get a happy ending. And there was a very good reason as to why Yoko Taro chose to go with multiple endings. Simply put, Drakengard was never meant to get a sequel, so if you don't like one ending, there's 4 more for you to choose from, ranging from bittersweet to utter despair, covering all the bases because Drakengard was not meant to have a sequel.
Actually, let me rephrase that. Drakengard was written explicitly with the idea of it never being continued. Okay, I know what you want. If you're here, it's very likely you heard me talk about the first Drakengard. It's only the most popular thing I've done by a wide margin. And now you want me to do it again, but for the sequel. If I may, you want a sequel to that. You want me to go and structure this in chapters and get all dramatic about it, right? Okay. I'll do it. This is what you wanted, right?
Drakengard started with fire. Fire of the battlefield, fire from the wounded red dragon. Your very first mission? Kill. Kill to save my sister. Kill to save the world? Kill because I have to? Doesn't matter, because everything around you wants to kill you too. So you march into the castle of the goddess where Kaim enters his pact with the dragon and becomes an invincible warrior. That was your introduction to this world. Chaos, bloodshed, and lies. Whereas Noah's story has a very different beginning. You do start in a castle, but you're not storming it. There's no army to fight. This is your home. You belong here, and you're not welcomed by an opposing army, but by a childhood friend. Ares introduces you to combat and some key game mechanics in a safe, risk-free environment, and after the tutorial, your first mission is still not active combat, rather a friendly sparring against the leader of the Knights of the Seal. And only after you've done this is when you get tasked with your first real mission. Everyone's talking about how we're here to protect the world and keep the peace and defend the seal. And when the knights leave the castle to go protect the seal, it's not framed with a speck of desperation or despair. These are the righteous knights keeping the world together. Noah is proud to fight alongside them on the back of his dragon partner Legna. He swore to dedicate his life to protect this world, which as we all know, exists in a very delicate balance.
But where are my manners? Let's introduce you to the characters who'll be in this journey.
Orphaned as a child, Noah was found and raised by the gentle dragon Legna. His wings were his home, and the valley he grew up in his entire world. Eventually, Noah would be found by Auror, who adopted him as his own, and taught him the ways of humanity. Noah would grow into a fine young man, with a strong sense of justice imparted onto him by both of his adoptive parents. By the time he turned 18, Noah gets sworn in as an official knight, known as the Dragon Boy. His peers would learn to respect and fear him for his amazing strength in battle. Noah would prove to be an invaluable asset for the knights, but quickly discovers that this organization that he idolized so much may hide darker truths. The Blue Dragon. He found and raised Noah when he was just a baby, teaching him the language and ways of the dragons. When Auror found Noah and asked to take him to live with his kind, Legna agreed on the condition that he would accompany them, as he had grown attached to the boy and wanted to stay part of his life, so he and Noah would become a team, not bound by a pact, but by friendship. Legna is your trusted partner through this entire adventure, lending you his wings and fire to help you on your mission. But he as well has darker intentions that Noah is unaware of. Noah's childhood friend and a competent knight in her own right, she's the one that introduces you to the game, the castle, and the knights, your first guide in this chaotic place. In contrast to the first game, it's nice to have a friendly face to guide you. Ares is a loyal and devout knight, willing to pay whatever price to keep the seal safe. Even if that price is her beloved childhood friend.
Lady Mana. It's Lady Mana. It's her. Lady Mana. Really her. It's Lady Mana.
It's so nice to see an old friend. Or well, at least a familiar face. You don't remember her? Let me refresh your mind. Mana is Sarah's twin sister. All she ever wanted was love and seems to lack any sort of empathy or regret. Gleefully dances and laughs after Furiai takes her own life. Like I said, an old friend. But it's been 18 years since the events of the first game, and Mana was just a child possessed by creatures beyond her understanding. I say we give her a chance to prove her worth now. So what is Mana up to now? She dedicates her life to help those in need, going from district to district destroying the keys, because the keys... Actually, we'll talk about Mana later. The Masked Man, the Deathless Reaper, he who feels such guilt that cannot bear to show his face to the world. Yurik was a member of the Knights of the Seal, proudly fighting alongside Auror, Noe's adopted father. In fact, Yurik himself was quite a good friend to Noe, but when faced with a threat too big for him, he fled, leaving Auror to perish at the hands of the One-Eyed Man. In search of greater power, Yurik would make a pact with the Grim Reaper, sacrificing his mortality. But soon enough he learned that those who can't achieve death will begin to crave it. The world these characters inhabit may not be perfect, but it's one they've sworn to protect. After the fall of the Empire and the new goddess being appointed, the Knights of the Seal were founded, with the objective of keeping the new seal safe for good, establishing 4 keys to keep the goddess safe in her castle. The name might imply that the Knights are a militaristic faction within an existing government, but let me be clear, the Knights of the Seal are the standing power in Midgard. They act as the government, and anyone's position within the hierarchy is directly proportional to their military rank. For most people, this is a pretty good deal. The world is united under one flag and there's no threat of war, so people are free to live their lives as they please as long as they don't get into trouble. That is unless you happen to be a former citizen of the Empire. Because when the Empire surrendered, in exchange for mercy for their people, they made a deal that a section of the population would be made to live in the districts. What are the districts? The first one we see is the District of Shining Light. This is a place decorated by flowers, which perfume the area and purify it from its otherwise poisonous air. The people that live here are crucial to this process, since the flowers rely on their life energy. That is the true purpose of the Empire's people now, to be sacrificed to keep the districts working. This is the world that Noah was born into, a world in which the price for survival is human lives, a world in which he is only valued for his ability to destroy, a world in which the people that he has sworn his life to are lying to him. There's a reason as to why the Knights only show you one district, because it so happens to be the one that they could use to convince Noe that their actions are justified, because these people are the very same ones that tried to end the world 18 years ago. So yes, they should in fact be honored to be used as sacrifices to purify the world. Wouldn't they want redemption anyway? This is where Mana steps in. After her defeat, she was taken away to see the errors of her ways. Eventually, she would decide to fight for those who are oppressed by this new regime, and embarks on a quest to destroy the districts, to free the people whose lives are being used to fuel this unjust system. Eventually, Noe would be betrayed, and have his life threatened by the Knights of the Sea.
Do I really have to do this? Do you really want me to go and spoon-feed the story of this game that if you really wanted to know, you would just play yourself? This is not even a good game, spoilers I guess, but is this my life? Just playing a game that I knew I would hate and then make a show out of getting mad about it? Is this a good use of anyone's time?
The show must continue. You can't blame anyone but yourself. So sit down and listen.
At the very least, the game's sequel should try to be better than the original, right? This is something we can all agree on. So how does Drakengard 2 play in comparison to the original?
Well, the gameplay is again divided into ground and aerial battles, but both of them have been expanded on. Let's talk about ground combat first. Your weapons will dictate most of your options while on foot. Noe has actions to 2 types of weapons, longswords and short swords. Main difference between those two being attack speed, with longswords generally dealing more damage at the cost of speed. Every weapon starts at level 1 and can be leveled up to 4, with every upgrade giving you a larger magic meter, stronger attacks, and adding a new combo to your arsenal, which is a very welcome addition to the gameplay. Drakengard 1 did give you the magic and attack bonuses, but most weapons in the game suffered from becoming boring very quickly, having little to no variety in how you engage enemies with them. Magic works very much like it does in the first game. Depending on how much magic you have, you can charge an attack and it will be different depending on the weapon you're holding. The more magic you use for the attack, the stronger it will be. However, there are some enemies that are resistant to magic, so it's not going to solve every problem. The only real exclusion from the first game that I missed was the dashing mechanic. In Drakengard, if you ran for a few seconds, you could enter a sprint, running faster and allowing you to use the dash attack, which was incredibly useful for attacking multiple enemies at once, and running up to a faraway group of enemies only to violently blow them away was very satisfying. I suppose I did over-rely on it to an extent on the first game, which makes me wonder if that is the reason as to why it was cut, but I can only speculate. The rest of the playable cast is way more useful than in the first game. In Drakengard, I beat the whole game without using them once, since I found their time limit to be annoying and I didn't want to bother leveling them up. But in here, they prove useful depending on the situation and enemy type. Ulrich is strong against monsters, Mana is strong against magical creatures, Ares is strong against the undead. This alone gives you an incentive to use them and will make you grow more attached to them, to the point that I was kind of upset when I lost a party member because I could no longer rely on them for combat. And having an extra team member also means that if any character is low on health at any point, you can simply switch back to another one, making the whole switching mechanic very useful. Some boss fights are even made with the idea of switching between different characters, so in here they feel way more important than in the first game. The biggest difference in ground combat is actually when you're not on foot at all. The levels in this game are way more complex and varied. Drakengard's maps a lot of the time just felt like big empty squares with maybe some buildings in them, but in here you have maps where you can go into caves or underground, or make your way through an entire castle to reach a dungeon, or have to enter some catacombs that connect to another open area, and even in open spaces the game uses so much more vertical design, so of course the dragon controls would have to be adjusted to accommodate. You can still fly around, accelerate and throw fireballs at enemies, but now you can move vertically. Additionally, you can choose to stay in place and fire like a turret. This helps deal with specific enemies, but is a risky maneuver, since being stationary opens you up to attacks. The special attack is a downgrade though. In the first game you just pushed the button and the red dragon would rain fire on the battlefield. Quick, useful and easy. In here you have to lock onto a specific enemy, charge up an attack, and depending on how many magic bars you use, the attack will be different. Not only does it take longer to activate, but it also forces you to watch a lengthier cutscene with a fade in and fade out effect that ends up just feeling like the game pauses for a few seconds. As for the sky battles, it's pretty much the same as the first game. The only major change is how the special attack works. In the first game you just waited until your meter filled and then everybody died. Here you have to collect special power-ups that allow you to use different attacks. On one hand it allows for more variety and forces you to
I can't do this, it's just wrong. I have to be honest with you, there's not much I can really say about this one. Try as I may, there really isn't many interesting or unique things about Drakengard 2. Because while they tried to make a game that was an improvement over the first one, at the same time, they removed the very thing that made it special. Because Drakengard was not a fun game to play, it didn't have many likable characters, it wasn't a great looking game, the music wasn't catchy or hummable, but rather chaotic compositions that made you feel like you were losing your mind. Because art isn't made to be one thing. It doesn't have to make you laugh or give you good feelings in your tummy. Art is about satisfying the desire to create. It's about making you feel something, and Drakengard made you feel pain. It was written and presented in a way that called attention to how much of a terrible person a video game character that kills for fun would be.
It shows the consequences of a world that is driven by hate and fear, and how the people that inhabit it can only survive by sacrificing parts of themselves and losing their humanity, where ultimately, despite everything, try as you may, you will never get a happy ending because you don't deserve it. Going for all the endings in Drakengard is not an act of determination, it's fully stubbornness. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing and expect a different result, and this is exactly what you did when you tried to get the endings. It's the game laughing in your face and telling you that yes, this is how the story ends, and every time you try to fix things by using more and more violence, the endings get progressively worse. A. Your sister dies but the world is saved. B. Your sister and best friend die and monsters threaten to destroy the world. C. Your sister and best friend die and also your dragon partner betrays you, forcing you to kill her, then you die trying to protect the world from her siblings. D. The Watchers are released into the world and begin destroying everything. You're eaten alive, and the best course of action is to hit the pause button and never allow time to move forward. Congratulations, nothing will get better, but at least it can't get worse, right? Finally, if you really were insane enough to think that maybe the last ending would be a good one, the game looks at you, slaps you in the face, and says, "You really don't get it, do you?" So now, not only is your world doomed, but also you bring this same threat to another world which is completely unprepared to deal with magic. And even when you deal with the immediate threat and think that maybe you did something good for once, you get unceremoniously airstriked. And that was ending E. A final fuck you from the game. The complete thesis of Drakengard is telling you to your face that you are an insane person and that you deserve every single thing that happens to you. And you know what? That's brilliant! It's an imaginative and original use of the medium. It's a game that somehow uses being bad as a tool for storytelling. If Drakengard was fun to play, fair and balanced, it would be a worse work of art because somehow, against all common sense, it utilizes being bad to say something. And I find that beautiful. So when we get a sequel that is made with a completely different context, trying to fix everything that was wrong with the first one, trying to be a comfortable experience that builds upon the foundations of the first one and delivers a more palatable product, it's just not enough. Drakengard 2 is exactly what you would expect from a sequel, and that's why it's pointless. Because Drakengard took pride on not being what you'd expect a game to be. So then why would you even want to make a traditional sequel to a very much non-traditional video game?
Drakengard 2 was made because the first one was successful. And that safety, that lack of something to prove, it really shows in the final product. But even if I were to treat Drakengard 2 as a standard video game and ignore what made the first one special, it doesn't even pass that test. Because it's still not a very competent action RPG, being poorly designed and very frustrating at places. But when we discuss the story, it's chock full of problems.
For example, the Watchers from the first game, the whole reason as to why the seals existed and the very thing that the villain was trying to unleash on the world, they are insanely important because in this very game, we play as someone who unknowingly sets them free. However, Mana, who was the villain from the first game, knows what the seals do because she personally destroyed one of them, and now she is somehow surprised that destroying the seals releases the Watchers? On the same note, it is insane how many characters don't tell Noe about the Watchers. Mana, Yurik, Sarah, and Legna know exactly what the true nature of the seals are, and none of them want to see the world destroyed. And even when Angelus is released, one rampaging dragon is still way less dangerous than the entire army of the Watchers invading Midgard, but nobody seems to care. But also, they clearly still know how to appoint a new goddess to keep the seal going, because Ares becomes the new goddess in the first ending. Clearly, they did not care for Angela since they kept her in chains suffering. Why not just kill her and make a new goddess like before? It happens in the first ending anyway. And just numerically, it would be way more humane than the district system where they need hundreds of human sacrifices constantly to keep Angelus chained. They wouldn't need the districts if they just appointed a goddess. They could take a woman from the former empire and force her to be the goddess. It's shitty, but sacrificing one person every few decades must be way better than having hundreds of people living in misery forever, right? And on the subject of Angelus, in this game, Kaim has been looking for her to end both of their sufferings. Both of them want to die, so he wants to put his friend out of her misery. And by killing her, he is also laid to rest, since in here they establish that if a pact partner dies, the other one follows, which is a fucking lie, because Verdelay from the first game also had a pact with the dragon who later died, but he was fine. And in this very game, the dragon we ride, Legna, is the very same black dragon that Inuart made a pact with in Drakengard, and Inuart is dead! So why is Legna alive? If it was that the beast had to be the one that dies for the human to die too, that doesn't work because Verdelay lived. And it doesn't work the other way around because Inuart died and Legna is alive, so that whole mechanic of a shared fate doesn't hold any water. Another weird retcon is that Angela says that she was deceived to become the seal, but that did not happen. She volunteered to become the goddess.
I shall be the seal. No human can match my strength.
Which also brings into question many things, like, in that ending she disappeared, but she's here now, so I guess she just respawned somewhere else? The transition from that to never seeing Kaim again and being imprisoned by the Knights is very unclear. Somehow we went from a bittersweet ending where Kaim is alone but alive and now needs to find his place in this world after Angela's selfless sacrifice, to both of them becoming unstable and dangerous rampaging monsters who the Knights with the Seal hunt down to imprison them to keep the seal going. And Kaim was just going around killing people because he was looking for Angelus to kill her. But he never bothered to look in the very obvious place that is the castle of the goddess, the place where every single goddess has resided before? But even Then, since this game establishes that if one pact member dies, the other one dies as well, then hey, Kaim, if you really want both of you and Angelus to die, fucking kill yourself!
A lot of the returning elements here are underdeveloped, and I'm being nice here. Things that should be a big deal are just brushed aside, and it ends up feeling very confused.
Like Letna being the same black dragon from the first game. The dragon that devoured Kaim's parents and the one that fought on the side of the Watchers. He's now an ally, and yes, we later learn that he's been using Noah since the beginning, since he's a new breed, and he wants to use him to conquer the world. Oh, also Noah is kind of the child of Inuart and Furiae. He was created when Inuart finds a special seed of resurrection and enters the bone casket while holding the body of Furiae. That, combined with the blood of the black dragon, created Noah, which is so... what? The whole point of the Seeds of Resurrection in the first game was that they were not real. They were the seeds of destruction, and Inuart's foolish desire to reverse death ends on his demise in the destruction of the world. But let's throw that in the trash, I guess, because apparently he just found the wrong seed in Ending B. But in here, he found the actually for real Seed of Resurrection that resulted in this Sora from Kingdom Hearts looking ass kid. But somehow this was also Legna's plan from the beginning?
It's just so... much. It contradicts so many things, and just confuses the meaning of the first ending even more. I planned on going into more detail about this, but honestly, I just don't care. If anything goes, if they can just change whatever they feel like changing about the original story and the meaning it had, then why should I care about anything that happens?
And even more fundamentally, this game existing as a continuation to the first game ending feels so wrong. It's like telling me that all the other endings don't matter. And yes, I said that trying to get all the endings was an act of foolishness, but I said that in the sense that that was the thesis of the game. Those endings mattered, so now pretending like they didn't happen just feels disrespectful. But I guess, for all time's sake, let's talk about the endings of the game. In the first branch, Legna tells Noah that he's the new breed and he's the tool of the dragons to fight the gods. Noah refuses. After Mana confesses her love for him, he goes Super Saiyan and kills Legna. Then Ares becomes the new goddess and the world is safe. I guess. Then you replay the entire game in a higher difficulty. In Ending 2, Noah accepts his role as the new breed and tries to enter the bone casket, but then it possesses Mana and he has to kill her. He doesn't unlock his powers, but he, Ares, and Legna join forces to fight the gods, trying to end this cycle once and for all. And then... you replay the entire game in a higher difficulty. Ending 3 is like a mishmash of endings 1 and 2 where Noah battles the bone casket and manages to save Mana from being possessed, but then he goes Super Saiyan, fights and kills Legna, and somehow all the Watchers and dragons disappear with no explanation whatsoever. But like, the world is safe now, forever. Yippee. And yeah, that's Drakengard 2. I'm sorry that this whole thing felt disjointed. Maybe a bit confused? Did you struggle to understand what my point was at times and as a result felt less engaged? Huh. I'm sorry. I really could keep going. I could talk about how boring the cast of characters is compared to the first game, going from flawed and tortured people who deal with debilitating sins to a standard RPG party of brave heroes fighting for justice is a big downgrade. I could go into more detail about the abysmal characterization of Sarah and how he somehow becomes a tyrant, but at the same time the game frames him in a positive light.
I could try to make sense of this, but I already wasted too much time coming to terms with it. It's a bad game and we move on. But sometimes what you need is not a hero, but a replicant. That works, right?
Anyway, this is what happens when you take experimental art and try to fix it, not understanding that those flaws are precisely what made it unique. Seeing art as something to be perfected and not allowing it to have a less conventional approach to storytelling. Because in trying to make Drakengard better, they ended up taking away all that made it special. And as a result, we just get a very unremarkable game. Because Drakengard 2, plain and simple, shouldn't exist.